am the voice of Polly and Rose Allen.
I am the voice of Clotilda.
I am the voice of Osire Kibi.
Clotilda is the only slave ship that's been discovered that is essentially intact as an archaeological site.
To actually be able to see it with your own eyes over 160 years later, 6, 7 generations, here we are. We're still talking about the story, we're still preserving it.
I mean, seeing the actual ship that our ancestors came in on, man, it's quite amazing.
Today, we're heading to the site of the Clotilda shipwreck. We're starting a series of archaeological dives to assess the condition of the ship and the best way to preserve it. We've invited some of the descendants to join us so that they can connect with their ancestors, but also because they're such an important part of the Clotilda story.
Just being able to be at the very site of the location of Clotilda, knowing that this is where essentially evidence was destroyed, evidence that humans were illegally transported here back in 1860. It's a very surreal moment.
We have very few identified slave ships worldwide to begin with. And certainly Clotilda is very unique in my experience as an archaeologist to have a site to which you can directly tie descendants.
I hope they find as much as they can of our history down there and some kind of way get it back up here so we can see it.
Primary's 28.
The Clotilda was the last documented illegal slave ship to come to the United States.
The story of the people who were on the Clotilda is the best documented story of the entire transatlantic slave trade. We are talking about over 12 million people, and so far there's just one ship where we can have the entire story.
The Clotilda cargo numbered 110 West African captives being smuggled into the country against their will.
Clotilda is the last ship known to have illegally brought slaves to the United States following the abolition of the slave trade in the United States in 1808.
The story goes that Timothy Meagher bet that he could bring a ship full of Africans, and that's not the word he used, under the nose of the authorities.
Timothy Meagher was a wealthy plantation and shipyard owner.
And so they did it using deception, very clever deception. This was a shipbuilding family. They built a ship that was not modeled like the classical slave ship.
It was a lumber ship. It happened to be a very fast lumber ship. And then when the bet was made, was re-outfitted for slaves. And the fact that it was fast, they thought that that was obviously on their side. That was a benefit.
Now, the fact is, Captain Foster kept a log.
Fitted out for the coast of Africa to purchase a cargo of slaves. Cleared and sailed from Mobile March 4th with the following cargo and $9,000 in gold. 9 men for the mast, first and second mates, and myself.
Captain Foster kept a log, but that's his story. And the fact is, we also have the oral history, and those are the stories that we have to get at. It helps us reveal the truth.
I am a fifth-generation descendant of Polly and Rose Allen, who were both enslaved Africans on the Clotilda. There's not a lot written about Polly Allen, and a lot of my information that I've been able to capture has been through my research and my reading and my grandmother and some of my cousins. He was possibly from the western part of Nigeria. His African name was Kapoli. He was late teens, early 20s age, and he was probably a warrior of his tribe.
I'm the great-grandchild of James and Lottie Dennison. I know more about this than I probably would have if it hadn't been for my mother. She was the author of 2 memoirs for James and Lottie.
I am the great-great-granddaughter of James and Lottie Dennison.
This is James' headstone. Lottie was kidnapped. Her mother had sent her on an errand one day, and Lottie was taken, and her parents never saw her again.
We think she was around 18 or 19 years old when she was captured.
My grandmama, she was the one that instilled in me about history. Charlie that came over on the Clotilda, that was my great-great-grandfather. He was the head of the Talker tribe. They were hunting for food, but while they was on their way back to the camp, people were out hunting for people that they captured to take back or bring to America for slaves.
Cudjoe is my grandmother's great-grandfather.
I'm his second generation. She's the third.
I'm the third great.
There's a really wonderful book based on the oral history of one of the survivors of the Clotilda, who we know as Cudjoe Lewis, also went by the name Kazula.
This touches me in such a way. It's amazing. It is just truly amazing for us to have our history documented so well, to be so fortunate, you know?
Thank you, Jesus. Somebody come ask about Cudjoe. I want to tell you somebody who I is. So maybe they go in the Afiki soil someday and call in my name. And somebody there say, yeah, I know Kasula.
Cudjoe came from Benin, and he came from the Yoruba tribe.
And they were farmers.
So he was 17, going to 18, so he was going to become a warrior. He actually never had a chance to see that happen because of the village got raided.
It about daybreak when the folks that sleep get wake with the noise, when the people after homie break at the great gate. I see the people get killed so fast. They grab me and tie the wrist. I beg them, please, let me go back to my mama.
They got him. He never did see his mom, he never seen his siblings. He never did see anybody after that.
Generally, Africans are captured 200 or more miles in the interior, then forced to walk that very long distance from the interior down to the coasts, where they are sold to Europeans and later American buyers.
All day they make us walk. The sun's so hot. We sleepy on the ground at night. I think too about my folks and I cry. All night, I cry.
For Kojo and his group, it was about 5 or 6 days. And people were tied one to the other. There was very little food, very little to drink. And once they arrived on the coast, they were held in prisons called Barracoons, slave pens.
And you have men, women, children held in those barracoon settings for sometimes 2 months at a time. And you're sitting in that barracoon, disoriented, likely starved, likely in pain, having been marched all those miles.
And once they got there, they said, Charlie said, oh Lord. They knew then that they were at the place that they weren't gonna never return back to their camp where they had left.
So imagine living with that lack of hope, but still trying to survive.
We're here on the Mobile River at the site of the Clotilda shipwreck.
25.
It's in pretty shallow water, between 5 and about 20 feet deep.
15, drop.
I think we'll get a pretty good sense, not only of the condition of the wreck, but if the visibility has improved at all, we may be, on this dive, able for the very first time to see Clotilda underwater.
We're gonna jump in and we're gonna find the bow. We'll start there, which is where our buoy is located. And then likely we'll investigate the bow, then just take measurements and points along that starboard side of the hull and see what we find when we get there. The Mobile River is not your ideal diving conditions. Yeah, there tends to be a lot of debris. We have seen snakes and alligators on site. We typically don't have any visibility at the site.
Yep, so we know when you get on bottom. I'm on the wreck, but I'm not on the bottom. Okay. Trying to figure out where on the wreck I am. He's on the wreck. He landed on so the debris that's on top of the wreck right now.
Any dive into this wreck is risky. Any place where the ship has been splintered or broken, you now have very sharp projectiles that can go through a wetsuit like a knife would.
Got some pretty heavy structure here. Okay.
It can be disconcerting when we come up along a tree or piece of debris or even a loose timber on the vessel. You know, you go over it, not under it, so you don't get anything entangled.
How's visibility? Right now it kind of looks like chocolate milk. It's pretty dark. A lot of particulates in the water obscuring a vision. It's certainly well articulated here. This outer hull planking's in pretty good shape. The integrity in this portion of the wreck is pretty sound. Yeah. I think I'm coming up. All right, diver coming up. All right, diver up, diver okay.
So today we actually had what we would consider great visibility, about 4 to 6 inches. I have never seen the vessel until today. We focused most of today orienting around the outside of the vessel, focusing on that outer hull planking and focusing on the condition of the timbers themselves. The vessel itself is incredibly interesting, but really when you pair that with the story of the Clotilda and the individuals brought over, and then you talk to the descendants, it really kind of it's awe-inspiring. It's quite humbling. You can't separate the two.
Gampa is my great-great-great-grandfather on my father's side. So I'm his great-great-great-granddaughter. and he was from what is now known as Benin. Back when he was alive, it was the kingdom of Dahomey. So around 1859, 1860 in Dahomey, they were a very turbulent nation. So they would actually go to war with surrounding countries and other tribes, and they would take the people captive and later sell them to whoever came to the slave coast.
The buyers, like Captain Foster, would arrive there in Ouida and negotiate sales for Africans through a series of appointed officials.
Arrived at Ouida May 15th. Having gotten ashore safely, I met with interpreters who gave me charge of 3 natives who put me in a hammock with canopy and carried me into the city of Ouida, 6 miles distant. Upon arrival, I found splendid accommodations.
Slavers were treated very well, you know, and Foster was actually very surprised at the level of comfort of Ouida.
I went to see the king of Dahomey. We went to the warehouse where they had in confinement 4,000 captives in a state of nudity, from which they gave me liberty to select 125 as mine, for which I agreed to pay $100 per head.
And through a translator, he told the people to stand in circles.
They make everybody stand in a ring. About 10 folks in each ring. The man by themself, the woman by themself. Then the white man looky and looky. He look hard at the skin, and the feet, and the legs, and in the mouth. Then he choose. Every time he choose a man, he choose a woman. We all lonesome for our home. We don't know what going to become of us.
When you hear about the story, you hear about the door of no return. You had to forget where you came from, forget your family, forget your religion. You just had to forget everything that you knew. Going through that door is just saying that you would never return back. And that just gives me so many chills.
It was their last step that they did to prepare them to embark on that ship. And then they're taken by small boats into the ships waiting off the coastline. You get to that coast and you see that beast of the ocean for the first time, and picture that you see ships waiting off that coastline. And they're waiting to fill their hull with these people. One of them is you.
This is an incredible story. The Clotilda story has international significance.
This is the first phase that we're working on, the investigation that we're doing. We're collecting all the scientific information we can to find out the best way to stabilize and preserve the vessel. Today, we're doing a sonar image so we could get an idea of how the dynamic environment, the storm events, things like that are affecting the shipwreck.
One thing we're trying to get a handle on, if we're going to preserve in situ, we need to know what we need to do to keep it from deteriorating further.
We need to process the sonar results so that we can see our path forward.
So for the first 13 days, the people were held in darkness, in chains, in the hold.
Soon we get in the ship. They make us lay down in the dark. We stayed there 13 days. They don't give us much to eat. Me so thirst. They give us a little bit of water twice a day. Oh Lord, Lord, we so thirst.
It's pitch black. You are chained to another person. Most often, the men were chained to one another. On ships, there were women and children had more ability to move about, but they were still contained.
Cramped conditions, using the bathroom, where you ate, where you laid.
So you can imagine, you know, the horror of the situation and the filthiness of the place as well.
I can imagine they were praying and singing. They was afraid of being killed to throw it overboard.
They didn't speak the same languages. They didn't practice the same religions.
But even without words, they knew, each one knew what the others were feeling. They were all going through the same horror, the same agony, the same separation, you know, from everything that they knew, from their loved ones, and that created the birth of a family.
On the 13th day, they fetch us on the deck. We so weak we ain't able to walk ourselves. So the crew take each one and walk around the deck till we get so we can walk ourselves.
Typically, they would allow Africans to come up to exercise their limbs or take on some fresh air. But they wouldn't allow them to stay on deck for long periods of time. They would keep them shackled below deck.
How do you hold on to your humanity under the most inhumane circumstance? How do you will yourself to live through that? It's this idea that you can break my bones, you can strip me down, but what you're not gonna do is you're not gonna take away my understanding of what it is to be a human.
So what we're out here doing today is that we're actually going to attempt to enter the hold of the Clotilda, where the captives were kept.
What makes this very powerful, and it's chilling in this aspect, is that that hold where those 110 people were placed survives. So that as we go into it, we have the understanding of being the first people in there since those captives.
He's going to go into the water, and what he's going to do is he's taking a look over or in by feel into the hull, seeing what he can with the visibility.
Yep.
And so his standing rules of engagement on this dive are not to go into the hold any further than he can reasonably lean over or take a look at. We don't want him snagged.
Yep.
A little slack, Mike.
Understood. Driver's going to the inside of the vessel. As we move along, we go into a more open space, and at this point, the hull is widening from 18 feet to the full 23 feet. And this is the main cargo hold. And that's when you realize that what you're looking at is the place of confinement for the Clotilda captives.
We did go a little bit inside of the hull, and we see that there is probably anywhere from a foot or two to the mud line and a number of spots inside the hull, and then a couple feet of mud down into the bottom of the hull. And everything seems to be very similar to what the sonar imagery is showing us.
It seems to be pretty stable. That's good news that we don't have a lot of sediment that's moved off of it. That bodes well for the preservation of the wreck.
I can almost imagine Ulsa saying, "I'm glad to see you, grandson." Glad to see you. This is where they put us. This is what they did to us, and try to destroy the evidence.
Yeah, we're gonna do all right.
We're gonna do fine. And I know they're proud of us.
We're gonna do all right.
They're very proud of us. Drink to you, Grandpa.
From the start, what we've been doing, because this water is so murky, is we've been using sound to map it all with the sonar. Of all of the ships engaged in this trade, the thousands over the 400 years, to date, this is the only one found now and identified that is so intact that we're the first people in that space since your ancestors left. And this 500 square foot area, that's the area in which people were confined, has to be. So between these two spaces, 23, 18, 26.
Right.
Wow. Wow. I mean, you had to lay down flat. You couldn't hardly turn, and you.
That's what I don't think.
And you had to stay in that position for.
Until they let you up on board.
Until they let you up on board,
And this represents the hold of the Clotilda, which, as you can see, is not a very large space, even for the few of us. Imagine 110 captives aboard that vessel.
It's smaller than my basement. So that really puts a lot of things in perspective, and then there's only 6 of us in here, so to have 110 people.
You also have to keep in mind, too, that, you know, I don't think we really have any portal holes for fresh air to pass through. You only have the hatch.
Only the hatch.
Right.
Well, that makes me fighting mad now that our ancestors went through that, you know. It makes you get kind of emotional.
The slave ship Clotilda arrives in Mobile July 9th, 1860.
July 9th, I transferred my slaves to a river steamboat and sent them up into the canebrake to hide them until further disposal. I then burned my schooner to the water's edge and sank her.
Foster took the Clotilda to a remote place and he torched it. He actually, in theory, could be hanged. So he had to destroy the evidence.
The Piracy Act of 1820 made smuggling Africans into the country punishable by death by hanging. So they hid Cujo and his co-captives, the Clotilda Africans, in the cane brakes.
They stayed in the swamps. There were mosquitoes. They had little to eat.
How about this? You shepherd off of the boat. You're in this.
That's crazy.
It is.
160 years ago.
They had no idea what
was ahead.
Yeah.
Away from family, away from home. That's amazing.
It is.
Here, where Captain Foster burned Clotilda, and where it still rests today, we're on a mission to recover scientific samples from the wreck itself.
What we were doing is documenting positions of things and then recovering them. Even if the entire ship remains in the river, pieces of it, artifacts that speak to the vessel and to what happened on it, being available for people to look at.
If those items are found, it would be the first time that we have not only these items, but the story of the people who actually used them, and then the descendants.
stop, Daniel?
Yeah, that'd be great. And Joe, try not to move around, Joe.
When we were working and picking samples out of piles of broken wood, it was a selective process because we're looking for things that are diagnostic. They're going to tell us a story.
It's not ironic that the four of us are here witnessing this at this point in time. And there's a responsibility that we carry. And I think there's also a privilege to be able to even see this, to witness this.
Honor and a privilege.
It is.
I think we might be the only four people who've ever seen like the actual ship our ancestors came over on. So that's really a unique situation.
The Mobile custom officials have discovered that the Clotilda has come in to the port under the cloak of night in a very stealthy way. Timothy Mayer was subsequently arrested.
In the end, his case was dismissed because there was no proof, there was no ship, and there were no people.
Ultimately, Timothy Mayer won his bet.
And Foster was fined $1,000 because he had not paid duties on the imports.
$1,000 for not paying his customs duties, not for victimizing 110 West African captives who were brought to Mobile against their will.
Our grief so heavy. Look like we can't stand it. I think maybe I die in my sleep when I dream about my mama. Oh, Lord.
It's a quote, O'Fallon said, I goes back to Africa every night in my dreams. It was traumatic in so many ways because they were kidnapped from their home and brought to a strange place where they didn't know nobody. They just spoke the language among themselves, but they knew what they wanted to do. They wanted to go back to Africa, and they had no ways of getting back.
The Africans were auctioned off to a number of people. 76 were divided between Timothy Mayer, his two brothers, and William Foster.
Lottie worked in the house cleaning, cooking, or, whatever, but she was in the house. And, for that time, that was unusual because she was practically right off the boat.
The Mayer family were very prominent in the steamboat industry here, and I do know that Polly Allen worked on those steamboats, and they would be deckhands and that sort of thing.
Captain Jim got 5 boats run from the Mobile to the Montgomery. Oh, Lord, I work so hard. Every landing, you understand me? I tote wood on the boat. They have freight, and we have to tote that too. Oh, Lord, I'm so tired.
They were slaves for about 5 years until the war was over.
They found out that they were free around April 12, 1865.
After they free us, you understand me? We so glad. We make the drum and beat it like in the Africa soil.
The goal was always to go home. They always wanted to go back home.
When they found out that they were free, they went to the Mayer family and said, hey, we want to purchase our way back to Africa.
They say, Cujo, you always talky good. So you go tell the white man and tell them what the Africans say.
They chose Cajole to be the leader because of he had a way with words.
Right.
He wasn't scared to go ask for what he wanted.
Absolutely.
Mr. Mayor told him that I'm not gonna give you nothing for free.
Mr. Mayor told him, "You're not going back to Africa. You might as well make the best out of this situation because you're not going back."
So what he did, he went back to the group and told them what Mr. Mayor said. And so they all sat down and came up with a plan.
We're working hard and save, and eat molasses and bread, and buy the land from the mayor. They don't take off 1 5 cent from the price for us, but we pay it all and take the land.
And they couldn't go back home, so they had to make the best of the best. Okay, we can't go back to Africa, so we'll make our own Africatown.
I have a deed where Osakibi purchased the land from the mayors. I have that deed. I think he purchased that land for about $150, something like that, which was a lot of money back then. and Cujo Lewis had purchased land too, and all of it together, we called it Africatown.
And so the picture of him relaxing in his chair at the fireplace.
It was a flat, open house with a fireplace, and he pretty much had all his blacksmith tools and his gardening tools.
We are at Gumpa's chimney. This is the last remaining part of Gumpa's house that he built along with the rest of the people in Africatown. So this is kind of the last remaining, I guess, remnant of that time.
Africatown started to thrive as its own little community. Like, they founded Union Baptist Church. They started a school, Mobile County Training School, which is still there. People have also talked about, like, they had movie theaters, so they had, like, all kinds of things.
My uncle and them just stayed in them houses just like they were from Africa, and they let the windows open, and we could just go in, and they ain't locked no doors.
They all collectively work and save money to buy this piece of land.
Water is vital, and as we think about...
They kept some of their customs and languages, and those Africans would play their drums. They can bring African dishes and just have a good time and speak the language.
If you were to go there today, it's pretty much a shell of what the community used to be. The houses that are still there are very dilapidated. It's very rare that people have a nice house living in Africatown.
Well, what is Africatown like today? I'd say it's a community that was once vibrant, that's struggling to survive, both economically, culturally, even environmentally. So that Descendant community is looking for some healing because they're trying to reclaim our memory and reclaim identity and reclaim culture that was stolen from them.
You need to know the story of Africatown to appreciate Africatown. What we are seeing here is going to be the future home of the Africatown Museum Heritage House. This will house artifacts. It will take you through the story of Clotilda, through the story of Africatown, and how the two mesh together. Well, hopefully next time you see this place, there will actually be a welcome center here and not just a sign.
If we get on the shore, you can take your boat.
The next steps for Clotilda are to finish the scientific studies that will help us determine the best ways to stabilize the shipwreck for the future. We've just started to explore the science, the artifacts, and the additional secrets it may hold.
There is certainly discussion of some sort of memorial on the water or, nearby for the shipwreck. Hopefully our study will help inform that and show a path forward towards memorializing the shipwreck. I see it as a physical anchor for the story.
Ocean. I do have flowers that I would like to place here in honor of the people who made it over, for the ancestors. Modupe. To be able to be here and honor them today is just like, I can't even put it into words.
All of us look for a touchstone. Where do we put our sorrow? Where do we reconcile our history? And where do we reconnect with our heritage? And so I think that's important for people to be able to have that.
We feel proud.
We're very proud.
We feel proud that we had that bloodline. I think that's one of the reasons we are who we are.
These are our people.
That's our history.
This is us. This is us.
There's a sort of privilege, right? The fact that I have the ability to at least trace my heritage and my ancestors to the last known slave ship.
Most African Americans don't have this. They can't point back to the person, to the spot, to the day and say, this is where my story in the United States began. And we're extremely fortunate to be able to do so.
This is part of African American history. And it needs to be in the history books.
Let's tell about Mobile, Alabama, where the last slave ship come. Just because it's in the South, and it's been a long time coming, and they still there, so they want their story told.
We have to keep it alive, too. It's for the younger generation to be proud of who they are and where they came from.
Absolutely, I am my ancestors' wildest dream. That spirit of my ancestors, that spirit lives in me.